Hey everybody, Andrew Fouts here. We're just giving you a brief heads up as to what to expect of the CSRM podcast over the next few weeks. Dr. Linville was recently on my show, Ministry Misfits, and we discussed Muscular Christianity, what it was, what it is, what it's not, and how sports outreach ministry as a whole can be the key to all of this. So we have taken the full-length Ministry Misfits episode and chopped it up into CSRM podcast-sized pieces to share with all of you. So if you listen to today's episode and want to hear the full episode now rather than wait, you can hop on over to the Ministry Misfits pages and you can listen to it there, or you can wait and it will be coming over the next few weeks. This is also a preview of some of the things you can expect out of the Agone Institute. The Agone Institute is our certification and education branch out of CSRM. If you are interested in learning more about all of this, feel free to contact us on the CSRM website or at the Overwhelming Victory website. You can also contact us over on the Ministry Misfits page or email Dr. Linville directly, and we can get you hooked up with all of that information. So, enjoy this Ministry Misfits episode on the CSRM podcast.
But what happened then was this re-engagement, and both of the original engagement and the re-engagement were both based upon pragmatics. The initial engagement was the pragmatic of I can actually become this manly Christian, I can integrate my faith in sport. The re-engagement happened because the evangelical world, that fourth one of the expressions of Muscular Christianity, said pragmatically, we can use sport as a tool to reach people for Jesus. Why was there a disengagement? Because they couldn't reconcile a lot of these theological and ethical issues. Why are we now having a current disengagement with sport and manliness? It's because we again are falling into the trap of not having a proper theology.
Right.
Both engagement periods were based on pragmatics, what works. Both of these disengagement periods are based on the fact of having faulty, very weak theology. This is why we're doing what we're doing with OVP, with OVR, with CSRM. We're trying to build the foundations of theology so that today women don't have to fear muscular Christianity, masculine Christians. They don't have to fear them because the men that are getting the solid theology about what it means to be a man means I can love my wife, I can serve my wife, I can care for my wife, I can care for my daughters, I can care for all women. I need to be for them what Christ was for the church, laying my life down, not asking them to lay their life down, but me laying my life down for them.
And that right there,
when we get the theology wrong, it becomes toxic.
And that
all right,
what we just talked about there was actually one of the things that I've found so strange over the past 2 or 3 years, is that we actually now are starting to see a theology. Well, they're claiming it's a theology. Really, we know it's a heresy. A theology going around and being taught within churches that sacrifice is not something that is biblical or godly. And that the idea of Jesus having surrendered himself to death makes Jesus weak. And we can't have a weak God because then that makes us weak as well. But that's not what we see in Scripture. It's very clear how this all goes down. Death has no authority over Christ. Christ has to give it permission to do its thing. And he gives permission willingly. But when we take out real theology, biblical-based theology, we run through the 3 tiers on here all the time. Before Brandon was allowed to come on, I had to test him on it. We run through this stuff all the time, because once that theology breaks and it's no longer Christocentric, because we've replaced it with either one of these 3 other categories. Once Christ is no longer the center, it no longer can be biblically based. And if it's no longer biblically based, we start getting all of these other outlets. This is why when you hear people blame church attendance dropping because of the fact that youth sports are happening on Sunday. Your church attendance probably was dropping before youth leagues started doing things on Sunday. You just didn't notice, because you were focused in on some other aspect.
And that's why I appreciated too why Greg was talking about really the foundation, especially of the church. I think for a lot of, I'm going to say, kids growing up, their foundation is rooted a lot of times in sports, where it is 5, sometimes 7 days a week, and you're spending an hour of practice and 2 hours at the games. And so they get rooted in this sport and competition, where then sometimes faith comes on later on. So they start with this foundation of sport over faith and what was rooted and taught into them growing up. So it can be sometimes hard to retrain or relearn some of those habits that start off at 4 or 5 years old, that they learn competition and you got to do everything to be sport. And that's just all your time is consumed in. And so then it's hard to kind of rework that a little bit. Not impossible, but.
And it's not, which is part of what Greg is about to walk us through. Is that this 4th model, this box that's up in the top left, right? Top left? Mm-hmm. Yeah, top left. I'm not... Directions and, this sort of thing is just about as good as math for me here. Up here. No, it's backwards. Up here. Whatever it is. Yeah, you get the point. It's on the screen. This redemption synthesis model of sport, of we are going to integrate and not separate out. We're going to integrate. They are going to blend together, where we are going to stay Christocentric. We are going to stay biblically based, but we're going to do so in an athletic or a recreation or a fitness style manner, is 100% possible as long as we actually keep our theology straight.
Absolutely.
And so this is where Dr. Linville, you and guys like you, guys that, Todd James, Roger Oswald especially, who we got to get Roger on here at some point. Roger Oswald especially, guys like Brian Mason, Stuart Weir, you guys have all been talking about this stuff for a while. And the thing that most people don't realize when they come to CSRM or come to, organizations like us, like our foundational partners, is that before we even start talking what sports they're going to do, we start talking theology with them. So what actually is the proper response here? How do we get to that redemption level of sport, of we are going to redeem it? What should the church's response to muscular Christianity actually look like?
Well, you indicated already the 3-tier paradigm. It's got to start with theological truths. What do we believe? What do we think? How do we envision? And Brandon, to your point about, the churches are these kids are out there and they're on a playing field and they're not in the church anymore, and they want to blame the sport. I want to blame the church. I want to put back on the church and say, because you as a congregation have not given these kids and their families a quality sports experience and opportunity, they're going outside of the church. And we've had a very major para ministry that has been producing sports leagues for churches for a long time now. And when they went to that model of saying, we're going to join them, so to speak, we're going to start actually doing tournaments on the Lord's Day, this is part of our problem, not the solution. I maintain that if congregations do sport excellently for kids Monday through Saturday, those folks will be there on Sunday morning to worship in a traditional sense. We know we can worship through our sport, And the church just needs to go out and do sport well. And what do I mean by that? I describe it like this. Now, you got to understand, I love summer vacation Bible school. I think it's one of the greatest things the church has ever done. But most congregations' approach to this is they do sports ministry, they do vacation Bible school with a ball, as opposed to doing a soccer league, football league, basketball league with a Bible. There's a difference in mentality. And those young people that have been gifted by God and called by God to be great athletes, we need to see, the church needs to see that we need to enable them, empower them as much as we do anybody that has a gift of music or drama or preaching or teaching. Everyone have different gifts. Everybody was designed differently, and the church needs to help those kids come along. And if we do that, they'll be there Sunday morning. They'll be in youth group on Wednesday night or Sunday night or whatever. But we need to do it.
And this is where, we really, as we wrap up here, we're not just saying, oh, well, if you redeem it, then it's good. No, we've got to redeem it well, which is why we focus in on the theology stuff so much. But what comes out of it when we actually do this well, when we actually go get into biblically based principles out of Christocentric theological truths and then practice the methods that follow, when we do this stuff, we start to...
Andrew, to your point, you were a collegiate baseball player, and a great coach there, Bob Starcher, had a saying: shoddy is shoddy. It doesn't matter if it's Christian or not, it's still shoddy. Do it, and do it well.
Right. And when you do it well, you see the results. Starcher is a perfect example of that with his wins. Crank finally passed him up while I was there, and that took a long time. But, what we see, the arguments against muscular Christianity, toxic masculinity, Christian nationalism, abuse, all these different things, what we actually see when we do sports ministry well within our churches, when we do it relevant, like we talked about at the beginning, when we do it with an evangelistic discipleship mindset of this idea of the Bible, we're doing these camps, but we are doing it from Scripture, not just doing it to do it. It promotes discipleship. It promotes redeeming of competition, which is what we're all talking about. And so now you don't have to feel bad about the fact you're excited that you won or you're bummed that you lost. It allows us to promote this non-toxic masculinity, this biblical manhood that we talked about with Chalmer Williams a while back. It promotes equality for females because they are able to compete. They are able to do these things well themselves. It allows us to promote an actual family unit.
Let me wrap up.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me wrap up with one last biblical understanding when it comes to this, because I am concerned. I'm deeply concerned today about how this revival of muscular Christianity is going to be taken and misused, and toxic masculinity is going to come out of it. Nationalism is going to come out of it, unless we get back to something, and that is the Bible. And there's the verse in the Bible that is used in a negative, and it's misinterpreted, and it says that wives are to submit to their husbands. I'm going to give you two things there. First of all, if you jump up a verse or two above that, it says that they're supposed to submit to each other. Okay? And so that verse is taken out of context and only applied to women when it's for both. The second thing I'll tell you is that in the ancient language, the original language of Greek, that word for submit, the best way I can describe it is that when you go to the doctor and you're sitting there on the side of the bed, and he takes a little hammer and hits your knee, and your foot just kicks out. You can't help it. In fact, if it doesn't, there's a real problem. It's indicating you've got a real neurological problem. And that's the sense of the voice and tense of that word, that when the man does what he's supposed to do, lay his life down for his wife, the woman can't help but submit. It's the little hammer. And so it really comes back on the man, that when a man's doing what he's supposed to be doing, the woman just naturally is following, and not even following, but just reacting. And so this is where we are today, that if people do not get to the bedrock of the biblical theologies about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, we're going to end up with toxic masculinity and this nationalism that takes us in really negative ways. We've got to get back to being Jesus and being like Jesus, and then the other things naturally come along. I'm done.
And this is how, we can.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we can close out on this as well, because we talked last week when we talked the essentials of a church, as far as what essential doctrine actually is and how we get it. Part of what we talked about is that the reason we pushed it towards the front was because of some of the conversations that have been happening on my Twitter feed since 2022 started. The first one of these conversations where I was just like, what in the world is going on anymore, was because of the fact that we had a well-known, I'm not going to say, you can go look on Twitter if you want, because he proudly posts it. There's a widely known evangelical pastor that made the comment about if wives would just submit, and we need to be focusing on submission within our marriages instead of submission to vaccines and government and all of these other things. And so I just kind of twisted the words around a little bit and said, maybe if we didn't focus so much on forcing our spouses to submit to us, then we wouldn't be going and reinterpreting verses on how we are supposed to submit everywhere in our lives. And the response that I received was much more what we were just talking about, this toxic masculinity. Well, Christians don't submit. Christians are not supposed to give up. Christians are not supposed to do this. On the flip side, one of the other conversations I had is there's a woman who is dealing with spiritual abuse, which we're going to talk about in our documentary and things like that, coming out of a church where there's a former, or a member of her former church that has been harassing her on Twitter. And so me and a couple other pastors have been trying to back her up a little bit and give her some encouragement. But one of the things last night, I finally went and looked, because this guy's convinced that harassment is the proper response when somebody goes apostate in his mind. I looked up what his pastor, another well-known famous pastor, wrote a bunch of books. I finally went and looked up what the pastor has been preaching as far as how the church is supposed to respond to criticism and slander and persecution. And what the pastor has been teaching is that you're supposed to fight back, stand up, hold on to your faith as a weapon and not as the tool that we use to keep ourselves fighting through it. And so I finally responded, I think I understand now where you're coming from. You are not the one that is fighting here. You have been poorly trained with poor theology and poor eschatology. And so this is the only response you know how. This is why we talk so much about theology mattering. Whether that's in your sports leagues or it's in the pulpit, both of those places need to have strong theology if it's coming out with your church's name on it. Because your members are going to respond to what is being taught. And so, Dr. Linville, we're going to talk about that next week, actually, when we talk about ecclesiology, we talk about the local church. We're glad you came on. If you want to support us, you know the drill. Buy me a coffee or go to csrm.org/donate. You can donate there. In addition to finding my name on the list, you also can find Dr. Linville. You can also support him financially through the same method. All of that money is tax write-off. It also goes to support the entire mission and vision we've got. We are out of time for this one, but Dr. Linville will be back with us next week, and we're going to talk about one of his favorite things beyond just sports ministry, is what the local church is all about. So we will be back next week.
Ministry Misfits Podcast is a production of Overwhelming Victory Flix, Overwhelming Victory Radio, and Ministry Misfits Media. Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts are our executive producers, and Brandon Simmons is associate producer. Our music is provided by Morning Light Music and is titled Rain. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can email us at ministrymisfitmedia@gmail.com or by following @ministrymisfit on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can support Ministry Misfits at anchor.fm/Ministry Misfits or for FO1C3 credit by going to csrm.org/donate and selecting Andrew Fouts in the campaign menu. To learn more about Overwhelming Victory or to listen to our sister podcast, visit overwhelmingvictory.org.